Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins, and it's an absolute pleasure to be joined today by Heleen Kist.
Hello, it's lovely to be here.
Thank you, Heleen. It's lovely to have you here. And look, we've got a lot to talk about. There's a new book on the horizon. For people who are listening in audio, you're missing the front cover view of all the wonderful books Heleen is responsible for. But let's begin by asking you to maybe introduce yourself, give us a little bit about background, context, your journey, and maybe a little bit about the books that you've written in the past, and bring us right up to date, will you?
Happy to. So you'll notice that my name is a little bit odd. It's because I'm Dutch, and I grew up moving from country to country a lot, and my work is as a strategy consultant, which has had me globe-trotting as well. Nevertheless, I live in Glasgow and have lived in Scotland for over 20 years because I married a Scotsman, and I've come to realize that Scottish men are net importers of women, foreign women, and it's very pleasant to live here. So I also have two teenage children, and I reached a point in sort of 2017 of, well, a little bit earlier, to just a little bit of midlife itching. Yeah, kind of, is this it? You know, have I done enough? It's all very comfortable right now, which of course I should never complain about, and I'm hugely privileged that way. But I started challenging myself with a number of things, and included in that was stand-up comedy, which went okay, you know. And again, with a mind of, let's have a go. What's the worst thing that can happen? Somebody thinks I suck. Well, fine. I don't mind that too much. I was going to try the acrobatic silks, you know, when they kind of twirl themselves into this beautiful scarf. Found an instructor and everything, and she said, can you do, how many pull-ups can you do? And I'm like, 0. She's like, well, this may not be for you. So really just looking for another challenge that was, in my mind, extremely different to what I did day to day, both as a professional and you know, and in the family. And it just so happened that an old friend from high school who lives in Morocco had just published a thriller. And it's called The Moroccan General. It's in French, but I think the second one was translated in English. And I thought, oh, first of all, I'd love to see what Emin has done. And secondly, it was going to be good for my French because I went to French school because I moved around so much. So, but it was getting rusty. And I wrote it, and I thought, you know, this was a cool book. And I always liked the James Pattersons and the Grishams and stuff. And I thought, why don't I write a book if Emin can do it? And he was in the science strand at school, just like I was. You know, I studied chemistry. Ultimately, I'm not, you know, historically literary. I figured if Emin can do this, I can do this. And so on the 1st of January 2017, I told my 500 or so Facebook friends, this year I shall write a book, just to make sure that they would hold me accountable. And the product of that was In Servitude, my debut. So I never thought that I would write more than one book, given that this was already a little bit of a whim. But what ended up happening...
Sorry, Heleen, In Servitude, I just want to get the dates right. Was that 2018?
That's 2018.
Yeah. Okay.
So I did write the book that year. I had lined up a beta reader, which for those who don't know is somebody who will read it as a reader and then write a report to say what they thought. Now, all of that's very subjective, of course, but this one was particularly helpful. And a developmental editor, again, which is somebody who can look at the structure and the characters and what you've done. And really all I'd done is taken a James Patterson masterclass online and had a go. And on the 23rd of December, I'd lined them up. I sent it saying I'd like some feedback by the 4th of January. And the next morning I woke up to about 6 emails from the beta reader who was in India, so time zone difference. Oh, I've received it. Thank you. Oh, I've started reading it. It's really good. Oh my God, what are you doing to Grace? And then in the end, I finished it. I think it's amazing. So I was really shocked by that because I never thought it, you know, oh, it's a real book. You mean it's a real book? And similarly, the developmental editor, though he was at great pains to point out that this didn't fit the traditional kind of tropes and plot structures of a thriller, that it was a cracking book. And that just really went, oh, so before that, I thought, well, I'm just going to self-publish this. My mom will read it, a couple of my friends who've been cheering me on, during the year, and that'll be that. But, with my business mind on, I went, wait a minute, this thing has value. Let's go try to exploit that. And I went into the agent querying trenches, learning all about that, which can be, for somebody who's very interested in how industries work. In my professional capacity, I thought it was very, very interesting. Emotionally, it's horrible. And they too agreed with the developmental editor that it didn't quite fit a genre box. And so I wasn't entirely sure what to do at this point. And Bloody Scotland is an international crime writing festival in Stirling every year in September, which is great fun and very welcoming. So really, I would encourage people to go. They have a thing which is called Crime in the Spotlight. And basically, much like a music festival, they have an opening act for panels. So most literary festivals, you go, there's a panel of four authors who are all very famous. But what they do is they give somebody who's starting out a 3-minute slot at the start of the panel to just introduce themselves and do a really short reading of their book. So I decided to apply for that. And when I got accepted, I had to have a book. So I did end up self-publishing that one and essentially launching it on the stage at Bloody Scotland, which was just a phenomenal experience that I'm still very grateful for. And I was there, and I had already kind of, met a book blogger before and asked her would she review. So she'd been reading it. She came to say hi. And their second question was, when's the next one? And I'm like, what do you mean next one? I've just written a book. It's only been out for 3 weeks. What do you mean I have to write a next one? But you just enter this whole world of magnificent readers and bloggers and authors who just devour books and produce many books. And they were so nice. And I had such a nice time with them that I thought, well, I would like to make more friends in this. So let me write another book. And essentially, I've kept writing books just to have more friends.
I love it. I love it, Heleen. And do you know what's interesting is I've spoke to a number of authors, obviously, and publishers. And I think when people first enter the world of writing books and having them published and festivals that you like the one that you've mentioned, it's such a welcoming community, isn't it? And I think sometimes it takes people by surprise at how willing to help people are. It really is a truly global open community, isn't it? And sort of the more you get into it, sort of the wider it becomes.
I completely agree. I think it's certainly true of the crime community, and it's that they're well known for it. Also, the crime community does always joke that it's probably not the same in the romance group, because we basically get all our darkness out on the page and then we're very friendly, whereas the romance, might have their bitchiness in their back pocket still. But absolutely, it's a very welcoming community. It's also a community that is very distinct to, my day job, which is very corporate, very professional, and deals with facts and data and very analytical things. And but then they do say, write what you know. So my second book is called Stay Mad, Sweetheart, and that is a corporate thriller. It is set in a data science startup in Edinburgh, which really is my professional world. And it is about, it's a feminist revenge story, but it's not anti-male in the sense that the whole point of the book is to highlight the gray areas of consent, of harassment and discrimination. And the fact that women don't necessarily even agree where the line is, so how could men possibly know? But it has all the little things that I myself have experienced in the workplace, just highlighted there very subtly, which is a lot of fun. And that was traditionally published. So I did find a small independent publisher called Red Dog Press to publish that for me. And that was nice because self-publishing, is a lot of work, and you're doing it all yourself and alone. And to have just somebody to work with, to collaborate on a book is great. I came up with the concept of the cover, but they made it happen, and the same was true of the first book. I had a designer, and I said, oh, there's this image of an exploding tulip. It's a purple exploding tulips for those who can't see. And aside from the fact that it's kind of, explosive and therefore, something breaks, it is a domestic thriller after all. It was a tulip, and I'm Dutch. And so there was a subtle bit there. And then after, what happened with Stay Mad is it came out just shortly before the pandemic. And so a lot of plans and translation rights and movie discussions and all of that were put on hold and fell away, which was a great shame. And I think Stay Mad Sweetheart is still in many ways the one that got away. It didn't get as much airtime and exposure as we would have liked. It's a very small publisher. I was practically their first author. So, in a very noisy place with, I hear it's 180,000 books published in the UK every year. I don't know. So how do you come forward is quite difficult. But it is, for people who like Suits, like the TV show Suits, it has a little bit of that vibe. So it's not a traditional thriller. There's no murder in that one, but it is crime in the sense that everything that happens is a crime. So then I went back to kind of the domestic sphere again, and Servitude is essentially set in my house because I'm lazy when it comes to research. It's my house, my neighborhood. I walk out the door, I know exactly where we're going. And even the characters, it's about two sisters. One who dies, is the first sentence is not a spoiler, and the other one then discovers that she had been up to no good with some of Glasgow's underworld. They come from Perth, which is where my husband is from, and so their parents' house is basically the house of my parents-in-law, just to make it simple. But I did like the idea of having another story set closer to home again. So What I Hid From You is my third book that came out just over a year ago. It's set next door to In Servitude, and there's a little bit of cameos in between. And that one falls into, again, not a very clear publishing box. I'm not very good at that, but fits within Servitude in the sense that it is a reasonably well-to-do woman gets accidentally embroiled with gangsters. So in the first one, in Servitude, it's the sister who discovers that her sister, who was running a vegan cafe, has been involved in money laundering. And has been made to, essentially. And in What I Hid From You, it's about a dentist who is, again, right, what a very busy professional with a family. In her case, she has an elderly dad as well that she needs to take care of. And Radha becomes traumatized by the death of a patient in her chair and succumbs to an addiction to Valium. And of course, that's a controlled substance. And even for a dentist, that's not the easiest thing to get your hands on. And she falls into the menacing clutches of drug dealers who blackmail her to deal through the clinic. How does she get out of that?
Well, it's incredible because we've started off and we've got closer. We're in your own home now. We're writing. We've kind of gone from the corporate area to, as you were saying, writing about things that and areas things that and the house in Paris and the house in Scotland, and it's all sort of coming together. So where do we go from here, Heleen? Where do we go from here?
Well, from there, we go to about as far away possible as a place that I would be, which is a gym. I am not a fan of exercise, and I am not a fan of gyms. And essentially, realizing, and this is one of the things you had asked me to think about, what kind of tips do you have for aspiring writers? The industry at the moment is very clear that it requires books to very clearly fit in a box of genre. So, the first two were domestic suspense, but with gangsters. So it's neither Gangsterland nor domestic suspense. Stay Mad Sweetheart is corporate, but we just doesn't fit in any boxes, really. I think it's a little Grishamy, but hey. So I thought, fine, you know, I will do what you're making me to do. I will write something that fits in a box. And I always liked a good locked room mystery. And so I wrote Killer Bodies, set in the gym. Nice little play on words there. And I wanted to really pay homage to the golden era locked room, but in a modern setting, very contemporary setting. And when I did my research around locked room mysteries, you know, there's a lot of things that are called locked room mysteries now, which are more closed group mysteries. You know, the 12 people on an island is not a locked room mystery. What is a locked room mystery is you find a dead body in a room that is locked, hence the name, and you don't know how they died, let alone, you know, who did it or why. You actually don't even know how they died. So I really wanted to do that. And I did some research and realized that a lot of these books from the 30s were quite funny. The methods that people were murdered, you know, the cuckoo clock with the knife that strikes at noon, because the man would always take his cup of tea looking out the window at noon, you know, this kind of
so it's
slightly
darkly humorous.
Darkly humorous, slightly tongue-in-cheek, entertaining. And I did start out with the title because it's a gym, so Killer Bodies just jumped out at me. And then coupled with that, I just couldn't help but fill this book with dark humor, really. And it's extremely enjoyable. I have multiple impossible crimes, so where you just, you know, somebody drops dead right in front of you and you have no idea how it happened. And essentially, it's the story of Evie, who is the gym receptionist in a residence gym in a posh apartment building in Edinburgh, modeled after a real one, where coincidentally, somebody I know lives on the 12th floor. And I didn't know that when I wrote this book, which was really bizarre, on the exact floor where this all happens. And she's an edgy young woman who is kind of scarred physically and emotionally from an accident in a previous job, has this job as gym receptionist, is bored to tears, and everybody treats her like dirt. So she whiles away the hours drawing their gruesome deaths as revenge. And then one day, she's made to work on her birthday, which is annoying anyway. She comes into work and a man falls off the exercise bike and dies. And of course, everybody assumes it's a heart attack, but the doors are closed, you know, the phones aren't working, all of that, which you need in a locked room. And there are a bunch of people there. I can't exactly remember how many to start with, but a lot of them die, basically. And then, you know, within minutes, the next person dies and she walks out of the bathroom and just drops dead. So you have the rest of the people trying to figure out what the heck happened, who's doing this, accusing each other. And it's very tense because nobody knows who's next or what's going on. It was an absolute giant jumbo puzzle to plot. Because, you know, I wanted it to be contemporary. I wanted it to be not in a snowy resort, not on an island. I wanted to be right smack in the middle of a city. Why can't they just phone someone? You know, and there's all these challenges that you have to overcome. And it really was a lot of fun to write. And what but you know, so here I was writing something that was going to finally fit in a box, only to find that the publishers, because I do have an agent and she sent it out, the publishers loved it, like with everything. Oh, Heleen, you're so talented, it's so wonderful. But they couldn't fit it in a box because it was too funny. And, you know, I really thought that this was around the Knives Out time. And then, you know, the Knives Out sequel was bought at that time for $500 million. I thought, I'm onto something here. People want this content, and they do. And I know they do. And the reviews are coming in and they're fabulous. It's just the publishing industry is very risk averse. And, you know, I don't blame them. They are, well, I do a little bit, you know, there's an excess of supply. So it's very easy to say no. You know, it's like you can be a super pretty, super pretty girl and you enter a bar with lots of super, super pretty girls, and George Clooney's there, and he can pick whoever takes his fancy, right? And if today, I don't know why I say George Clooney, but hey, if today he happens to want somebody with a gap between her teeth, then that's the one he picks, right? And there's no rhyme or reason or predicting how that's going to go. The advantage, so I did self-publish this one again. And the advantage of that is that you can do whatever you like. And one of the things that I did, and I'll show it for those who are going to see it, but sadly, obviously the ones that are going to hear it. If you remember, this story is about Evie who draws the doodles. Well, what happens is during the locked incident, she realizes that the people who are dying are people that she's drawn dying, and that her sketchbook is actually missing. She noticed that in the morning. So I have added some of her actual drawings. So it is an illustrated thriller, which I don't think there's many of them.
It's wonderful, Heleen, and I think you're really onto something there, because you mentioned the Knives Out, and was it The Glass Onion that followed, if I'm getting it right? Yeah. Hugely successful, and I think there definitely is a hunger for that kind of genre. You know, it's humor, it's darkly humorous, as you were saying. I love the fact that Evie lives in this sort of prestigious Edinburgh apartment. You know, she's in the gym, she's kind of doodling away at people and plotting their demise on paper, and then all of a sudden it starts happening around her. But the other thing I wanted to say about what you've discussed is, particularly with this new book, Killer Bodies, it's a particular area that I like, the locked room, because I think it takes a particular skill. And as you mentioned, didn't you, give us a little bit of insight, the complexity and the plot layer that has to go through there. It's quite complicated, and it's almost, the more you sort of encapsulate a story within four walls, the more complicated it becomes. And you would think the opposite to be true. So I think, you know, Killer Bodies is definitely in that genre. It's sort of this boiling pot of this locked room tale that is, and I know people have said it, but it is full of surprises and twists and turns, and there's an awful lot going on in it. So does your background as somebody that helps, I mean, in another world, you are a strategic consultant, you're working with FTSE 100 companies and, you know, businesses of all shapes and sizes. Does that strategic way of operating in your sort of business life, does that help you plot and plan out the book, or is it completely different?
That's a great question. And I thought at first when I started writing that they were two different brains. You know, that, okay, I've done all of this with my analytical, smart girl brain, and now I'm going to do the creative thing. And, you know, I've done creative stuff before, but it was like, you know, participating in amateur dramatics and things like that. I've never created anything, can't draw to save my life. And I really thought they were distinct things. I do plot everything in advance, and that's relatively unusual. You know, you have the whole plotter or pantser debate, or difference of styles. One, you know, flies by the seat of the pants, and the other plots in advance. I am an uber plotter, so every red herring, every clue, everything is in my outline, which, you know, at 13,000 words is about a sixth of the book. And you know, somebody, I was saying this to an author, she said, I would call that a first draft. And, you know, in a way it is. It's got everything in it. It's just not written properly. And I really enjoyed that part of it, because what I love more than anything else is problem solving. And the problem statement you have is not just what happens in the story, but how do I make it engaging? How do I make sure, is it enough? You know, and so you have to keep challenging yourself in terms of, this is a problem. How do I solve the fact that, you know, this person couldn't be there at that time? How do I choose what points of view to use even is a problem? Because if you have a single point of view book like In Servitude is, you can really only follow that person and what they're doing. And you can't give the reader any clues that that person doesn't have. And so that is a particular problem in and of itself. Like, how do you uncover the truth when it is just you? Both What I Hid From You and Stay Mad Sweetheart have multiple points of view, which just allows you to also cut away from a scene from time to time and then not immediately go to the next moment. In servitude is really chronological. It's just, it goes over the course of a few days. So all of this problem solving is very exciting to me, and the plotting of it is a lot of fun. And Killer Bodies in particular was tremendously challenging, because how do people just drop dead in front of you, and how do you get that to happen? And if it is all hermetically sealed, in essence, this box, and what's funny is the locked room mystery again is usually that everybody else is on the outside of the room and the victim is inside, but here everybody was already inside and people just dropped dead in ways that you can't fathom. So, and I wanted more than one, right? And oh boy, do you get more than one. So that was just great fun and creative problem solving. Again, how do I make sure, there's no mobiles? How do I make sure this and that? And again, I've used 2 points of view there just to change the angle and to be able to put a little bit more suspicion on various things. So people then ask, well, is that not boring then when you go to write it, if you've done all the plotting? And I say no, because every chapter is then another problem to solve. I know what 4 things need to happen in this chapter, but then how does this flow naturally? How do you tell the story? Is this, how do you make this credible and all of that? So coming back to your question of how does it differ from my job, once I realized that actually what I was doing was problem solving, I realized it was the same thing. And also when it comes to strategy and, a company deciding what their way forward is, it's not just an analytical exercise, but it is also a storytelling exercise, because they have to tell that story to the executive team to convince them that this is the right thing to do. They have to tell that story to the employees to get them to work along and to buy into it and to be enthused by this. And in some cases, they have to tell the story to the markets as well. So in a sense, I've been telling stories all along and I didn't know it.
Well, thank you, Heleen. That's great insight. And I want to ask you something, if I can, about not just your writing style, but you've obviously got the corporate role, if you like, and then you've kind of got the author side to what you do. And then, of course, you've got life somewhere in between, the middle of that. And for many people, they like the idea of writing a book, but when they're holding down a career or a job, they might find it difficult. So how does that work for you? Are you sort of, burning the midnight oil? Are you an early riser? When do you write? Does it just flow onto the page? Do you set a word count per day? How does it work for you over the last, or has it been different on all 4 books?
It's been roughly the same, I would say. I mean, the 3 that followed in servitude came quicker than in servitude, because I had to start figuring out what even is a book, to write and take that course and find people. But so I am an independent strategy consultant. That means I'm self-employed. And my work comes like buses, 3 projects at a time, and then none at all. And so it's when the buses aren't coming that I write. And I write during the day, and I work at a desk as if this is my job. I'm not hugely productive because, contrary to my normal activities, there is no deadline. Nobody's waiting for this. And I'm a very deadline driven person, and I just, I'll give myself deadlines, but they don't count, right? So I need to get, my editor, Sarah, because I do use an editor, to give me deadlines, because otherwise it just doesn't happen. And even those I don't believe in. So when I'm writing, obviously it takes about a month to plot the book, I would say, but then, and write that all up. And so you have essentially everything that needs to happen. And then it's a bit like training for a marathon. You just have to get up and you have to do it, and you have to write the words, even on days that you don't want to, and you have to put in the hours. And when I look at the data, because I'm a data geek, I kind of average about 1,200 to 1,600 words a day, but I've taken all day, right? Because I'm faffing and I go and do my laundry and what have you. But also, I think, when a lot of people talk about I can churn out 1,000 words in an hour or something. Well, I'm sure that's true, but do they make any sense? Stephen King says he writes 500 words in a day. So I think I'm doing all right. In an hour, I might do about 300 to 400, but I do edit as I go. And I think that's again, quite a difference from how other people approach it, because I know what the story is. And I'm very meticulous in making sure that the pacing is right. I have very few developmental edits at the end. So other writers will, they talk about something that completely freaks me out, which is, no, your first draft is you just, throw sand in the sandbox and you build castles later. And I just can't do that. I just, it's wasteful. Oh my God, what about all the sand you didn't use for your castle, but you still shoveled in that box? So, this is my method. Everybody has their own way of working. And at that rate, I can get a book out, in a few months. But have essentially fairly limited edits. So, after that outline, which is draft 0.1, you have a first draft, which is if the outline's the skeleton, the first draft is the body. And then my second draft really is just putting the hair colors on and the makeup and a little bit more emotion and just sort of pushing the limits of suspense, pushing the limits of emotion a little bit more.
Thank you, Heleen. And the process then of getting a book out and into somebody's hands so they can actually become a reader and a fan and enjoy, the outputs of your work. You've kind of worked with a publisher, you've self-published, you've got an editor, you've kind of evolved from, you were saying, the very first book where you're kind of figuring out what a book was. And now, with Killer Bodies, you've got this really sort of almost lockdown process. You know how it works now, you know how many words a day. In an ideal world, if you're writing another book, or if you have other books on the horizon or in your mind in terms of what comes next, would you go down the self-publishing route? Would you go back down to look for a publisher? How would you approach it this time round? Or is that just, I don't know at this stage?
I think, it really depends what you're trying to get out of this. I am not an author who was always writing stories as a little girl. And, like so many are, who had always thought, I want to grow up and be a writer, who, went to study literature and all of this. I went to a French school. My exposure to literature was huge, but it was all just highbrow literature. And Madame Bovary every flipping year, and I couldn't stand her. And so, I did read, of course I did, and as an adult as well, but I just prefer the commercial stuff, and occasionally, a nice literary fiction, absolutely. And so I didn't really know much about the commercial stuff other than, what I read. And so because it's not been forever a part of my being, as it is for other authors, and I really just started on a whim. And the main benefit that I get from it is the social interactions, which sounds weird because writing a book is a very, very solitary thing to do. But we have whole support systems, whole support networks, and then the joy of meeting each other also face-to-face at festivals. I've just had a fabulous 3 days at Harrogate Crime Festival, which is every July. And so it would be lovely if they sold well. But I'm a very impatient person. And so in many ways, I'd rather get them out to the readers that I know are waiting for them. I do get emails like, when's your next one, etc. I'm dumbfounded to know that there are people who are genuine fans. I remember there was a Twitter moment a couple of years ago when they were saying, oh, name your top 5 authors. And a couple of people named me. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. And I just like, wow, that's amazing. I must be doing something right. So Killer Bodies, honestly, I just became a bit impatient. And like every competent woman who juggles everything in life, just went, fine, I'll do it my bloody self. Because and ironically, it's something that in What I Hid from You, my tale of an overly busy woman who juggles everything and therefore gets into trouble, is a warning tale, right? It's like, you need to delegate, you need to let go. That dishwasher doesn't need to be stacked the way you need it to be stacked. But it's a lot of the recognition of control freakery, and I am a little bit of a control freak. So I really, for Killer Bodies, I lost patience. And the other thing that happens is that when I'm writing a book, I already make the cover. So a concept, right? Because I'm not very talented, but I make the concept to motivate myself to finish the book. And actually, the Killer Bodies cover is one that I did make myself, having found a stock image that was very useful, and have developed over the years better Photoshop skills. But I just thought, I even have a cover. Like, what am I waiting for? And then I got enthusiastic about the idea of putting the illustrations in as well. And I hired an illustrator and that kind of fun. So would I do it again? I think if I was very busy work-wise, and therefore the patience beast didn't come into play, I would try probably for go through the agent and the publisher route again, just because I really would like to have more readers, and then those readers would then come back and read my previous books. And I'm seeing that now with number 4, the sales of the other ones are moving when I'm not actually advertising them. And so that would be nice. Obviously, earning some money out of this would be nice. At this stage, I'm in an extremely privileged position that I can consider it an expensive hobby. That again is why I say it really is important to know why you're doing this. If you want to make a living out of writing, you can do it being self-published. Many people do make a ton of money being self-published, but you have to follow a particular formula, and you have to work, very clearly. There are ways to do that are not necessarily the stories I want to tell. And so again, that is a choice that I'm making because I can. But if I had to, then I would be making different choices. And so, my ego would quite like a big breakout book, but at the same time, I'm just enjoying the ride.
Makes a lot of sense, Heleen, makes a lot of sense. So look, before we run out of time, there's 2 quick questions I want to squeeze in and ask you. Number 1 is there anything that we haven't maybe mentioned, or is there anything else you'd like to share with our worldwide audience? That's the first part. And the second part is, if people want to get their hands on Killer Bodies or your other work, or find out more about what you're working on, where's the best place to send people to?
Okie dokie. The first question, what have we not talked about? I think it's just, a request for people to support names that they haven't heard, that aren't on the table at the bookstore, and to try something out and be surprised. Because yes, there are people who self-publish books and don't have editors, and just it's full of typos, and they've just, created a book cover in Canva, having, no previous experience with it. They exist, of course, and that doesn't help the whole self-publishing cause. But there are many, many people like myself who do everything that the big publishers do, and more, because we have to do all the marketing as well, and make little book cards and hand them out and do all sorts of things that take a lot of pride in the work. My covers are beautiful, the formatting inside is surprising, so really just give indies a go, would be what I would say, because those are the authors that are writing between the genres. Those are the ones that can just write the stories that are a little bit different, and not, I'm not saying all the books are the same old thing, but it's just a little bit different. Where to find me? Well, Killer Bodies is not available in the US yet, because I'm holding that back with the hope of some stuff happening, but it is available everywhere else, or not North America. And it is available in as a Kindle book exclusively to Amazon, and the paperback in the UK is everywhere, and in other countries has been picked up by the odd retailer here and there. So you'd have to look for it. But the other ones are are in the US as well. And for people who like suits, check out Stay Mad Sweetheart. I think it's still kind of one that has my heart.
I think that's a good recommendation. I think there was a certain royal wedding that brought Suits to the attention of a lot more people. So definitely
and
want to check
I'm on Twitter, and I'm very friendly. I don't bite. I'm on Twitter as HKist. I know Twitter, or X, as we should call it now, is kind of going through phases, but it's still a great place for readers and writers to connect. Book Twitter, if you like, in Book X is a very warm community and just celebrating books. And of course, terrible things happen as well, but you can ignore those. So if you are an aspiring writer and you're not on X, Twitter, then it is definitely a place where you can learn a lot also.
Well, look, that brings us nicely to the end of the episode today with Heleen Kist. Thank you, Heleen, for being with us today. Thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening to this episode around the world. Make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help support the show. And of course, go out and grab a copy of Killer Bodies immediately and check out some of Heleen's previous titles. Thank you so much indeed, Heleen. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today, and I hope people join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers. Thank you, Heleen.
Thank you.